Welcome to our newest episode of Real Estate Real Talk. I am your host, Marilee Rowley, and I'm joined here by an amazing guest, Ron Nelson. Ron, how are you feeling today?
Marilee, I'm doing great.
Good.
I've known you for a long time, so this is fun.
I know. We have been friends for, I'm going to say, 15 years, maybe, something like that.
Well, it all goes back to you building a house.
And even before that, I brought you some clients, and you...
That's right. Now I remember.
That's right. And that's how we met, through our mutual careers in real estate.
We did.
And then we've been working together for the last, 10 years or so, 10 or 11 years, that you've been part of the Selling Salt Lake family. But before that, you were a new construction builder's agent. You were a lot of different things, and you can find out about all of the things that Ron has done in his life through reading his book called Engraved, the Upbringing of a Caregiver, which I have to say is rising in the charts. You've hit #1 on Amazon in several categories. Congratulations, my friend. That's amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
As a non-writer, I feel just excited, and how nice of you to bring that up.
Well, it's very impressive, and I want everybody to know about it. I read your book. It's very long. And I enjoyed it. And I had heard a lot of the stories that are in your book over the years that we have had deep conversations together. And so a lot of the stories were familiar to me. And even though I had heard a lot of the stories before, reading them in print and then understanding more context behind them and then learning new things was kind of a mind-blowing experience. You've had a pretty remarkable life full of so many different types of experiences. And I want you to talk about that.
Well, I've been told at least since I was 33, because I remember the time when I was told, that I needed to write my stories.
And that was a pretty young age to be told that you had enough stories to put in
I know.
the book.
I was 33, and now I'm 70. So it took me a while to figure out what I was supposed to write or what I was supposed to do, but it's always been something in my head that I'm supposed to write my stories, and so I finally got around and did it.
And when did you start the process of actually putting words to print?
About 3.5 years ago.
Okay, so it's been this part of it's been a journey too.
Oh, yes.
Getting from beginning to end.
Yes. I'm part of me, even though no one would guess this, I'm a perfectionist when I'm actually doing something. Like real estate or like writing a book, it's got to be perfect. So I went through many, 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 many edits.
Did you edit the book yourself?
Well, I did, but then at the end, I hired New York book publishers out of New York City, and Lisa Smith became my publisher there, and all she had to do was go through it once. She changed 3 words that I said no to, and other than that, other than spelling and a little...
Some grammar?
Yes, as you know that I need that.
I'm like, was it grammar, Ron? I will say in your real estate descriptions, you do have an unhealthy amount of affection for capitalizing words in the middle of a sentence.
Well, I have a tendency to go in this direction and then in this direction and then sometimes up and sometimes down. Mm-hmm. So I was able to pick up on that as I kept editing myself, yes.
Oh. Well, that is interesting, that whole process that you went through. But let's talk about the content of the book and everything that you had to relive as you were rewriting it. Did it put any of your early experiences in a different perspective for you now that you've achieved this great age?
Well, the whole premise of the book to start was I was going to write my engraved moments in my life. And that was my story. And I was a metal engraver before I met Mary Lee, and so I did it for a living. And I had a line of copper engraved postcards that I sold all over the country and parts of the world. And I thought that would be a good premise for a book. Of course, when I finished, I was told it wasn't a good premise.
Oh.
And that I really needed to find a thread that would tie my chapters together. And that's where caregiving came into the title of the book.
Oh.
So it was just going to initially be called Engraved, Ron Stories, or something similar to that. But then, and this happened in a swimming pool when it came to me, which is an interesting thing since I'm an avid swimmer. And just the thought of caregiving. And then when I went home, immediately after swimming, I went through each story or each chapter of my book and found that I could make this work, or I thought I could. And so that's where the upbringing of a caregiver came in, because I am caring for my wife, Sharon, and have for the last 15 years or so.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that the perspective of now you are the caregiver, and throughout your life there have been moments when you have definitely been a caregiver and brought comfort and peace and life-saving emergency skills to certain situations. But then also there have been times when you've needed a lot of caregiving in your life.
Yeah, I think you've hit it right on the head, Marilee. Up until I was 15 years ago, I was the one being taken care of for the most part. And so it's those stories and the lessons learned I received during being taken care of at a young age and into my almost 50s that I share.
Yeah. Would it be okay if you share a few of your stories in your book here today?
I'd be happy to.
I think one of the stories that you learn about sort of right out the gate is what happened to Lori.
Well, Lori was my friend, if only for, if I get emotional, forgive me. But Lori and I met in the middle of Bear Lake, which is a lake up in northern Utah. I was water skiing before having the time of my life as a 12-year-old boy, and the boat that I was skiing behind hit Lori and ripped her from the left shoulder. I'm pointing to my right shoulder, but the left shoulder down to her waist and kind of ripped her in two, if that's not too graphic. And because I was already in the water, I heard the man on the boat screaming for me and pointing, and it didn't take me too long to figure out something was drastically wrong. So I swam to where Lori was. Of course, I didn't know Lori's name, and I just knew that it was the goriest scene I've ever seen, if I can say that. And as a 12-year-old kid, Lori was torn pretty much in two. She was bleeding profusely out of her chest. And I really didn't know what to do other than after a minute or so and realizing that she was bleeding out, and after she had verbally asked me, "Don't let me die," that I grabbed into her chest and grabbed onto, I'm told, two arteries that helped save her life at the time. And
you're floating in the water.
Well, I'm swimming in the water, and I'm fighting with her because she is fighting back at me because she's getting very little air and can't, and she's, as a doctor later told me, she was dying right in front of me. So.
I can only imagine. And you're fighting. You're 12 years old. Lori is at this time a teenager.
17, 18 years old.
17, 18 years old. So you are fighting to keep both of yourselves, both of your bodies afloat, both of you, so you can both breathe. And you're holding her arteries pinched together in your fingers.
My fingers, yep.
And the boat comes back.
The boat finally came back. It had stalled after impact, and then it was kind of drifting away from me. And then, I don't know, I was in the water, they say, probably 20 minutes with her. And then the boat started. There was 3 other men on the boat. Imagine
the panic of the men in a stalled boat, and they know that there's this catastrophe happening, and they can't make it to you.
Yeah, all I could think of at the time was, where are these men?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
that were, well, the driver of the boat, and then the 2 that were looking on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they came back to you, and you're able to maneuver Lori up into the boat, and do you tell the men who are in the boat, clamp on to her arteries?
I did. I told Lou Vrain specifically. I remember Lou and Barry and Daryl who were in the boat, and I told Lou to grab the arteries. She's lost a lot of blood.
Mm-hmm. And this is the part that I think will shock most readers. What happens next?
Once we were all able to get Lori into the boat, I swam to the other side of the motor to the ladder where I could
climb up
and get onto the boat. And as I was doing that, the men, of course, were focused on Lori, and I was to the top rung of the ladder when all of a sudden the boat just took off. And when the boat took off, I was thrust backwards and left out in the middle of Bear Lake as the boat raced away from me, waiting for it to return, and it never did.
It never did. And you're 12 years old. You've just been through this very shocking, traumatic experience. Bear Lake, for those of you who don't know, is a big, deep, cold lake. And you were abandoned in the middle of the lake. And what did you do?
Well, the only thing that I could do is I might have yelled help, but I don't know that anyone was around to hear me except the seagulls that were flying overhead ready to eat me. But the only thing I knew how to do is swim. So it's estimated that I swam around 3.5 to 4 miles to get to shore. Mm-hmm. And that was tough because it was a windy day. It seemed like the wind was against me the whole time, but I finally made it and was grateful, and then worried the whole time about the girl that I had helped, and because I didn't know any of that story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What had happened to her?
Yes.
When you finally arrived on shore, and luckily you aimed yourself toward the right part of the shore.
Well, I was smart enough to know that the sun was setting to the west, and so I kept following the shore towards the sun.
Okay, so because that's where your people were camped.
Yes.
Okay, and so you got there, you stumbled onto shore, you found the group that you were with, and how were you? What was the greeting you got when you finally arrived back?
Well, the only conversation that I remember was with 2 ladies. One became my sister-in-law's mother, and one, Diane Tempest, who was one of my favorite people ever. And after talking to me for a minute, her exact words were, "You are the miracle." And those words will always stay with me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And just so everybody can feel some resolution, what happened to Lori?
Lori was life-flighted to a hospital in Logan, Utah. She was in the hospital for up to a couple of months But Lori survived. She later on, I want to say 6 years later, she got married. She and her husband adopted 2 children because she lost her ability to have children on the lake that day. And she lived with her children for the next 13 years. I would say unlucky 13, but 13 years. And then Lori passed away from complications from the accident, I was told.
Ron, that is such an interesting and fascinating story. And you really have to read it to get all the details. And so I'm going to another plug, Engraved, The Upbringing of a Caregiver by Ron A. Nelson. So the book contains not only that story, and that's not even the only life you've saved in your life. You have saved more lives than Lori's in such a heroic fashion. And you have stories that relay your own struggles with accidents that you have fallen prey to. And there's also a theme of suicide throughout the book and how to understand that life is beautiful and keep living. So it's a deep, important book, I think, for people to read. And where can people get it?
Well, people can get it in a few places, some bookstores, but Amazon for sure. I wish I had the link. And then get on Ron A. Nelson Books, which is my website, and you can find it there as well.
Okay.
So Ron A. Nelson Books, plural.
Because there's another one.
There hopefully is another one coming, yes. Oh. And not my memoir, it will be a fictional book.
I'm excited to read that one. I know the theme of that one, and I'm excited to read about it. Also, I want to say that the original, how many books were in the original printing? How many copies?
Well, in the original, we printed 500 to start, and since then we've printed, it's gone to print 3 more times, and this last print was 2,500.
2,500. So that was the 4th printing, and it's also available digitally. So if you want it for your Kindle or other reading device, you can get a digital copy as well. And now that they're starting another reprint in the future, you've added a new chapter.
I have. 3 days after my book came out and it was now available for sale, I fell off can I say damn on this, a dang ladder. And I was trying to get my TV to work. It was snowing that morning, and I fell. And I broke 4 ribs on my right side, and I needed help. And so it tied in perfectly with caregiving, and now I was the one who needed a caregiver again. And so that's what started it, and my publisher thought they were all for it. So we wrote another chapter, and it's just been done, but in the next reprint it will be there. So I'm excited for that. Yeah,
I think that'll be an interesting sort of full circle. I needed help. I am a caregiver. I needed help again.
Yes.
Throughout the time that you're still being a caregiver, of course, to your beloved wife. I also just want to say, Ron fell off a ladder, yes, and broke 4 ribs, yes. But, usually when you break a rib, they're like, well, bind it up, keep it tight, try not to breathe, try not to walk around. That didn't happen. What happened to you?
Well, 2 ribs were so badly displaced, so they had to plate them. And I needed surgery on 2 of the ribs to get them so that they would heal properly.
So they're all screwed back together, plated together.
They're plated together. If you look at the x-rays of my chest, if you could see them, you would see 2 big plates inside me. They look like 2 zippers. So they zipped them up. Yeah.
So when you decide to do something, Ron, you do it good. You really make sure it gets done.
It's either done really good or really poorly.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe that you had to have that surgery. I know you're mostly recovered now. You're back in the water. You're swimming again. And that swimming is also a theme throughout the book, how it has saved your life and other people's lives as well. So it's a great book. Everybody should read it. I definitely recommend it. My jaw dropped so many times reading about your remarkable life and your remarkable story. So thank you for sharing it with us. And
thanks for having me.
Buy your copies. All right. Thank you, Ron. This has been an episode of Real Estate Real Talk. We are realtors. We just didn't talk about that today. And we've been joined today by our producers, Kat Aspel and Camaro Holt. Thank you so much, ladies, for all the great work you do. And we will see you next time.